Let's jump right into it, Cole. Appreciate the regulars in the chat. My guy Eric, the Green Arrow. Who else is in here? Enish. Appreciate you guys for hanging out. College Football Playoff Committee. The last and final rankings come out. And the big news is that the committee, okay, I've got so many thoughts on this.
There's a lot of things that we can go with
The
this.
committee finally did what they were supposed to, in my opinion. And they put Miami in over Notre Dame. And I think ultimately that's the right decision. I think that is like there's no way you could not do that. I have other thoughts about Alabama. I have other thoughts about Alabama and Notre Dame. I have other thoughts about the way that the playoff committee continued to rank Notre Dame ahead of Miami. I have thoughts on all of that and have qualms and thoughts and discussion on all of that stuff. But ultimately, I think they did the right thing by putting Miami in over Notre Dame if those were the final two teams that they were considering, and it very much seems like they are, as Miami was the last team in, Notre Dame was the first team out. So I don't think Cole and I disagree there. We've talked about that for 6 weeks now, that Miami should be ahead of Notre Dame. So I think we got that part right. Cole, I do have some problems with, and it all comes back to this being a very subjective committee, do whatever the heck you want situation and then justify it later. And I think my big problem is why was Notre Dame ranked ahead of Miami for so many weeks?
Oh, brother.
That is, and I said this with FSU too. If you were going to drop them because Jordan Travis was hurt and you knew that's ultimately what you were going to do, don't leave them ranked at 3 or 4 for 4 weeks, or 3 weeks. Sorry. Just go ahead and drop them behind. And then we wouldn't be in this situation, because I don't think Notre Dame deserved to be in over Miami because the head-to-head has to matter. But their players should not have played the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, believing that they would be in over Miami. That does suck for them. That sucks for their fans. That sucks for their players. I think the committee it's one of the worst committees we've ever had. They could not explain the most simple. They couldn't explain the most simple things. So I hate the committee. So my big takeaway is Notre Dame should have never been ranked ahead of Miami, just like Florida State should have never been ranked ahead of Georgia and Ohio State and these other teams that you dropped them a few years ago. And then, so I'll just start there and we'll continue to go on, because I do have other problems and stuff that we'll get to, but there's my big issue. They did the right thing, but man, the way they got there sucked.
It truly was a moment of you finally were able to correct the error of your ways, but the process on how you got here and what you needed to see to guarantee that this happened was beyond baffling and quite literally the dumbest thing that you could possibly do. Like, yes, Miami always belonged in over Notre Dame when it came down to this data point of head to head. Does it have to matter? Absolutely. But let's just call it as is. Guys, they have been making mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake from the get-go. I thought they criminally dropped Alabama far too low and they lost to Oklahoma by 2 points. I thought they emphatically found a way to say that, listen, Miami's going to find a way to drop another game, so we're going to put them at 18 to begin with and put them all the way back on up. Because they said is that we don't believe that Miami is good enough to be in the college football playoff, but Notre Dame is. I thought it was absolutely egregious that they respected every single head-to-head, including last week, Vanderbilt and Texas, moving Texas ahead of Vanderbilt for the first time because of the head-to-head matter, and screwed out Miami. They had an opportunity to fix it on Tuesday. They made it clear that Alabama was not going to be left out of the playoff if they were to at least be in that number 9 spot. They could have done it again and said, listen, Miami now at some point, we can make it clear head-to-head has got to matter. Therefore, we're moving Miami into the 10 spot because of it just has to be this way. Mm-hmm. But you chose to leave it up to chance. And what you really chose to do is believe that BYU was going to be able to win the Big 12 title and then make it a moot point and say, oh, look at that. We don't have to put either team in. Both are going to be left on out because of now we have a reason to not leave out BYU and we have a reason to not leave out Texas Tech. So therefore, they're in, you're out, problem solved. That never should have been the process. Guys, you cannot leave opportunities like this up to chance. You can't. And then when eventually we saw BYU lose, and then eventually we saw Alabama lose, and I'll get to the Alabama thing in a little bit, you finally had a reason to say these two are head-to-head. They have the same strength of schedule. They have the strength of record. They have the same common opponents. They have the same margin of victory in a lot of games. So what's the last data point? Oh, week one, we saw one team lose and one team win.
And that should be the first data point,
That
not to
should be the
interrupt you.
first data
Yeah,
point.
but like, what are we doing?
When everything else is matched on up, that should be the first data point. And you said, nope, that's the last one we're going to consider. And then to act like afterwards, well, after BYU lost, we had to go ahead and look at that game. You had to? When you first come up with the committee process and say, hey, we got some games that we got to pay attention to because it may come back to haunt us. Why are you not looking at that to begin the start of the playoff conversation? That's just it. So incredibly pathetic excuses from Hunter Yurachek and the committee. They had no idea what they were doing. They were making up rules along the way. They contradicted themselves throughout every single process. And lo and behold, they get the right teams in when it comes to the head-to-head matchups. But it was so clunky and such a dire, disrespectful performance of how we got here that honestly, the only thing that we're talking about is how pathetic. The only thing we all agree on is that the College Football Playoff Committee has got to be disbarred. You got to change up the way that you go about it because the only thing that works is you guys were so incompetent up until the final whistle where eventually you were able to get it right. Quite literally, you pulled a Pat Kraft of landing the right hire by waiting until the very last minute.
Which we'll get to that in a moment too. Listen, I've got issues with, and again, do I think they ultimately maybe got the right teams? Probably. I have issues with the roller coaster that you just mentioned that Alabama has been on for the last month. Again, I agree. I think all of these things are true statements. One, they were dropped too low when they lost to Oklahoma.
Yes.
True statement. I don't think the Iron Bowl win was enough to justify moving them back up a spot over Notre Dame. Now, you could still say that they were better than Notre Dame before that, and we got the ranking wrong. If you got but that's still fine. You still screwed it up then. You just admitted that you got it wrong. So, one, I don't think they should have been dropped as low. Two, I don't think they did anything to prove to me that they were better than Notre Dame in that last week of the season. And three, I understand that their resume is the resume of a top 10 team, but for the last month, Alabama hasn't looked like a top 10 team.
Sure.
And I think the way that you're playing at the end of the game, at the end of the year does matter. And so if I'm Notre Dame, I think there's this big conversation about Miami and Notre Dame. I almost think that Miami should have been in because they had the resume and they had the way they were playing. And the conversation should have been Alabama and Notre Dame. And if it had been Alabama and Notre Dame, you would have been picking those two teams based on either straight resume or the way they looked. Alabama with the better resume, Notre Dame with the way they looked. But again, every move that they made with Bama over the last month, dropping them too far, mysteriously bumping them up last week, and using rushing yards as
which
a
was
way
such a
to,
dumb metric to begin with.
okay, they used rushing yards as a metric to move them up. And then they had -3 against, and I understand not penalizing teams, although the other three conference champions or conference losers did get penalized this week. I understand if you're using that as your metric, but then to go up and have -3 against Georgia and that not be a data point, we've lost the plot so far.
Sure.
If you look at the simulated BCS, it's very similar to what we have now. So ultimately, I do think they mostly got the right teams in because you do have the 2 automatic qualifiers, which again is a massive joke, and the ACC is a massive joke, and that has led us to where we're at right now. Congratulations to JMU and Tulane. I'm sure they're happy about being there. I'm not trying to crap on those programs, but the whole thing is just a complete cluster. And again, you mentioned, I mentioned it. The committee is the worst that we've ever seen. It is just not even close with how bad this committee was, how terrible they were, how they just get locked in on something. And the entire college football sphere of analysts and broadcasters and fans and programs can agree on something. The committee's just like, no, dog, we ain't doing that. And that's weird to me, man. And I don't like to be told I'm wrong about things either, Cole. I'm prideful, but man, what are we even doing here?
Yeah. Now, listen. Let's talk about the Alabama thing real fast. Let's get there because there are two truths to every situation. Number one, Alabama has not been playing like Alabama for the last month. That is just a straight up fact. Nobody can argue with it. And I don't want to hear about injuries, and I don't want to hear about other things. They don't have a great offensive line. They can't run the football. They're one-dimensional as an offense. Wide receivers are dropping passes left and right. The defense is the backbone of the team. And quite literally, they lost on multiple explosive plays in the Auburn game to allow them to mount a comeback to where you need that fourth down that fourth down play to get into the end zone and that big strip on Cam Coleman to guarantee you a win. That's just the bottom line. Alabama right now is not playing like a top 12 team. I think that Vanderbilt's playing better than them. I think that Texas is playing better than them. I think that Notre Dame, I think Miami, they're all playing better than them. Here's where the conversation has to go when you're talking about penalizing Alabama. Let me just start here. The reason why Alabama is in and BYU is out is because of one data point. Alabama won the head-to-head in the regular season over Georgia on the road. They did. They went into Athens Stadium, a place that nobody wins, and they won the game in the regular season. And then they proceeded to be embarrassed in the matchup as the number one seed in the SEC. And then they had to use that as a point. Texas Tech did the exact same. I mean, BYU did the exact same thing. They went on the road to face off against Texas Tech. They were obliterated in the regular season, but they get an opportunity to make up for that game. They were obliterated in Arlington. It wasn't close. I don't want to hear what you say about the score. They had less than 150 yards of offense going into the going into the final minutes of the third quarter. It was a dominant defensive performance. They were blown out in both games. So guess what? Because one team won a head-to-head matchup in the regular season and the other team didn't, that is why Alabama is in and BYU is out. If Alabama lost to Georgia twice and BYU lost Texas Tech twice, it's an argument. Alabama does not belong in the playoff at that point. You lost the same team. You had an opportunity to go ahead and make it on up, but you didn't do that. So therefore, Alabama's in. And Alabama was never going to be punished because do you really think that the college football playoff committee is going to look at Greg Sankey, a guy who is not thrilled with the fact that they have to not have more SEC qualified teams in for the ACC, for the Big 12, for two G5 teams and go, hey, that team that was number one in the SEC going into this matchup, that team that won every single game, including a game against the similar opponent they just lost to, they're out of the college football playoff. Sorry. And I would not feel bad for Alabama if they were out of the playoff. I wouldn't. But I understand the reason why they're in. I'm shocked that they didn't move them down in the ranking. I'm very shocked that they're not number 10. But they were never going to be out. They could have lost 50-0. They still would have been in the playoff.
It is a little surprising to me that they didn't move them down at least one spot. But maybe they felt like they couldn't do that because then the Notre Dame Miami thing, they needed to get that right. But again, there's just no consistency with this committee.
Yeah.
Like all the other three Power 4 conference losers got moved down at least one spot. Ohio State obviously flip-flopped with Indiana. Virginia dropped by losing to an unranked Duke, and BYU dropped too. Now, BYU was, I guess, dominated by more than Texas Tech, but very similar games. Had BYU stayed where they're at, maybe we do have a little bit of a different result. It does. And it's just strange. I do think they look at matchups too. Don't kid yourself that they don't look at matchups.
By the way, they have 5 ranked wins and Notre Dame has 1. That's it. They have 5 ranked wins. You have to value that, and you have to value the conference championships.
What's
tough? Conference.
You're not wrong about valuing the resume. Bama's resume is so much better than Notre Dame's. It's not even close.
It's not even remotely close.
But eye test over the last month,
Notre Dame is 1,000% better than Alabama.
And that's what the problem with the entire committee is. How do you weigh those? I mean, there's no answer. This is hypothetical. How do you weigh those two things equally? How do you weigh a team that has a great resume and doesn't look very good this last month versus a team that has looked great this last month? Like one of the hottest teams. Like, how do you value that? How do you in your mind? The answer is it's impossible. And that's why we have a committee that makes no sense because we don't know how to value those things.
And I'm going to say the quiet part out loud, and I'm okay with being the villain here. I really am. The G5 has no business having 2 teams in the playoff. They don't. It's disgusting. It's malpractice. And unfortunately, the only person to blame in this is Virginia. Because if Virginia wins, then guess what happens? Virginia goes to the playoff. JMU's out, and Tulane goes. I'll go a second step further, TJ. I think that the playoff committee, they wanted Virginia to win because then they could justifiably keep Notre Dame in the postseason. Pate brought this up, and I completely agree with it. I've said it for a while, too. They were not going to leave a Power 4 conference out. They weren't. Yeah. And the second that Duke won that football game, in their minds, they had everything lined up, everything to say, we have to put Miami in. Yeah. And so this was another thing that the committee decided to do. The way that they got here is such a problematic excuse of an overall process that shows we have to change something. But they got the right result. It's just, we're not talking about the right result. We're talking about how it happened. And that's the infuriating part. And that's where we are as a committee. But again, do you want to value conference championships? You can't penalize the number one seed in the SEC. You cannot penalize the number one seed in the SEC for when they lose a game. Even because guess what happens? They won a game off of a fluke because if they had one conference loss despite having the same record as Oklahoma. Every single one of those teams lost one game in conference play, except for Oklahoma. Texas A&M lost one conference game. Georgia lost one conference game. Ole Miss lost one conference game. So guess what? Alabama lost one conference game, but they beat Georgia. Therefore, they have to play the head-to-head again. Why would they play it if they knew that they were going to be out? Yeah. Why?
So let's go to Notre Dame for a minute, just because I feel like this does fit in here. And then I want to talk about the bracket for just a moment. Then we'll move on to some of these games. I do appreciate everybody that's in here watching. We've got really good live numbers. Every time we go live on a Sunday night, you guys really eat that up. So we may have to figure that out for the off season. But hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. I know a lot of you are in here enjoying this and have taken in a lot of college football content. We actually do this all year, so we'll be here doing this in February. Yep. It won't be as dramatic, but actually we do have a pretty good segment lined up for February, so it might be. But Notre Dame opting out of a bowl game. I've got mixed feelings here. I've got mixed thoughts.
Loser mentality.
So I do hate it. What I will say is if they were about to pull what Florida State pulled in 2023, where a bunch of the starters opt out and don't play, then I'm glad they did this instead of subjecting us to watch that again, because nobody needed to watch that Orange Bowl in 2023. The final score after the first quarter, that was like 7-3. And I was like, man, shout out these young guys that are really fighting against Georgia. And then obviously Georgia put up 56 points after that. But I don't love this overall because you need to go play in a bowl game. I think this is my biggest problem, and why I somewhat understand this from Notre Dame, is Notre Dame should have never been ranked ahead of Miami. That doesn't necessarily justify what they were doing, but if Notre Dame had been ranked at 14th all along and just been, I think the committee thought Miami will drop to, Virginia Tech, or they'll drop to NC State, or they'll drop to Pitt, and then we'll be fine on this. No big deal. Or BYU will win, or one of these other teams, some chaos will happen. If Oklahoma doesn't upset Alabama, Notre Dame's in right now because Oklahoma's out with their third loss, right? Sure. So I think the committee thought there would be enough chaos to where it wouldn't hurt them. And so I do not love the decision from Notre Dame, but I do understand that, man, I hate the way that I would rather blame the committee than Notre Dame. I think the way the committee puts out rankings from week to week that are completely meaningless and there's no logic behind them, and they make things up every single week, and they go on tangents and they can't defend any of their positions. And then all of a sudden Notre Dame, who was sitting at 9 or 10 going into this thing, doesn't play a game and gets jumped by another team that doesn't play a game when they should have been behind them anyway. I understand that side from Notre Dame. It doesn't mean that I like the decision. It doesn't mean that I'm okay with it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't make them sore losers. All of that is still true. I just hate the committee more than I hate Notre Dame's decision, I guess, is my final takeaway there.
Yeah. For starters, I'm going to make this abundantly clear. Notre Dame does not need to join a conference. Notre Dame does not need to have that conversation about joining a conference. If you think that they need to join a conference because of this, you're stupid. Like they have everything that they need to go ahead and get this done. Here's where I have a problem with Notre Dame. This is the entire part right here. Nothing else. You have a very young but promising team coming back next season, and you're going to be really, really good. I think even better than you were this year. Absolutely. And you were screwed out of a playoff spot. You were, because the committee never should have lied to you this way. If we never knew anything about where they were ranked to begin with, then guess what? Problem solved. Here's the thing. You have a young team that needs the practices. You have 15 practices that will get you prepared for a bowl game. On top of that, it's 15 extra practice for CJ Carr, for this young offensive line, for this young defense that all is going to be returning next year. And keep in mind, you're going to go ahead and put yourself in a position where, guess what? You're able to now have the recruits that you brought in from a very talented recruiting class and be able to start going after transfer portal players that put themselves in a position to where now you feel that you're going to be able to build that continuity. So you get 15 practices that are valuable. You want to know what happens when you opt out of a bowl game? You don't get those 15 practices. You don't. I'm sorry. So now you're taking away reps from CJ Carr, from Aeneas Williams, from young offensive players, everyone from a defense that needs this to be able to better prepare for next season. And you get to play against a team that right now is screaming in your face, You do not belong in the playoff. We belong in the playoff. So I'm sorry. Like, there's no way to win this because of, yes, already it's bad for metrics. You look terrible when it comes to, hey, we're going to take our ball and go home. We're just going to do that. The other thing is, you're taking away valuable reps and opportunities for this team to get better and put themselves in a position where they can be even more specific and more promising next year. I will die on this take. Notre Dame right now was playing better than Miami, playing better than Texas, playing better than Alabama, playing better than everybody, and they had a shot to go to the national championship. I thought that they were good enough. You lost a head-to-head game and you were kept on out, and then you lost a game to Texas A&M, and therefore it was problem. So sorry, I mean, like you can't leave it up to chance. You simply can't. But you have an opportunity to better your roster, and you took that away from these young players as they need to have as many reps to prepare for 2026. I'm sorry.
So I think Notre Dame. I mean, I do think them joining a conference, and ultimately you have to weigh your priorities. And some of their priorities are not to be in a conference, and they want to do the independent thing, and they like money. And there are some cons that come along with their approach. I think them joining a conference would help them, and I also think that other Power Four leagues should I don't know. Again, with the ACC, there's a scheduling agreement, so I don't know if there's really much that can be done there. Um, but man, I think other Power Four leagues should take a hard look at considering how they're going to do this. I just saw that Dellinger just tweeted that. Let me pull up my Twitter
By
because
the way, TJ, I don't think you're stupid. I don't think that you're stupid. I just think that the
everybody
conversation
else
is
though.
stupid. I just think the
No,
conversation
no,
is
it's
stupid.
fine. No, I don't. I mean, I do think I'm stupid. If Notre Dame finishes inside the top 12 starting next year,
They're automatically in.
they would automatically get in.
By the way, it changes too because every year it moves back even more. If it goes to
Right. Every
16,
time they add teams.
it
And
goes to 13, 14, 15, 16.
I think that other Power Four programs should not play Notre Dame. Now they will still because there's a big paycheck when you play Notre Dame in a neutral site game. It's good for your TV ratings if you play when Alabama play. Like, yes, it's very good. I get it. But if you really want to make them join a conference, you'll stop playing them. Like we can all cry about it, but until your favorite program, whoever you're watching as a fan of, until they start playing them, they ain't going to stop. They're going to keep doing this. I mean, they're going to get in next year. They're going to go 10-2 at worst, and they're going to get in next year, right?
And now with the addendum, they'll be in the top 12.
And so, yeah, especially with that, right? And so, Miami was a little bit lucky with how this shook out. And not lucky. They won the head-to-head. I don't mean to just put that on Miami as luck, but if it would have been last year, the head-to-head wouldn't have mattered, or they would
No.
have just ranked Notre Dame 13th to do that. But man, that'd have been quite the slide. So, all right.
I'll tell you right now, just looking at it again, I think Miami is one of the most dangerous teams going into the playoff. I really do. I love their defense. I think that if you give them an opportunity to win on the line of scrimmage, they're going to have the chance to beat up on anybody. And they dominated in a lot of ways in that matchup against Notre Dame. You can't take that away. You can't. I think that also you can have this conversation. And I heard two of our friends bring this on up in Rafino and Joe. At some point, you can actually just have the conversation. Do we just say that Notre Dame is the ACC representative if it gets that bad? Because you play an ACC schedule for the most part.
Looking at the bracket, JMU, Oregon, Alabama, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and Tulane, Miami, and A&M. Obviously, we think Oregon and Ole Miss will win those first two games. I think Miami can certainly go into Kyle Field and win that game.
Yes.
I'm not – now, what Miami shows up, I think matters. But, man, A&M, their last couple of weeks, certainly not super impressive. I think Alabama's going to go into Norman and find a way to win. I'm not as confident there. I certainly think Oklahoma could win. Their spooky things go down there on in the the Palace on the Plains. I think that's really interesting. I think Texas Tech, Oregon is a ton of fun. And then again, on the other side, Ole Miss getting a chance to play Georgia in a neutral site. Now, you don't have Lane there, so that is a big deal. But I do think we'll get some pretty fun games. We'll get some blowouts for sure with, the two group of five teams that you complained about a second ago. Indiana's path is not easy, but man, if they can win that first round game, I think they've got a great chance to get to the national championship or the second round, right after the bye. Yeah, if they can beat either Oklahoma or Alabama, they've got a great path. Ohio State, Miami could be phenomenal. And then, listen, I'm glad that Ohio State and Georgia finished up as 2-3 because to me, that would be a game in the semifinal if that's what we end up getting. Ohio State and Georgia, and then the winner gets, Indiana or Bama or Oregon or Texas Tech, whatever. I don't want to just completely discount Texas Tech. I think they'll make the semifinal, but I think, man, as much as I hate the committee and hate how they got to everything, the bracket sets up pretty fun outside of the 2 first round blowouts that we know we'll get.
Let me just ask you. Let's just do a call a spade a spade. Let's just do it. If you put Notre Dame in Oxford and you put Texas in Autzen, how much more fun would that be?
Oh my gosh, it'd be amazing. It would be amazing. Notre Dame going to Oxford, you said 11, right?
Yeah, Notre Dame goes to Notre Dame in, and then Texas. Or better yet, how about this? How about if we really want to care about the 10-2 team being on it, send Vanderbilt up to Autzen Stadium.
Yeah, or shoot, if they didn't go Vandy, what about BYU?
Yeah,
going
again,
up to
you
Oregon?
know BYU up there. Again,
BYU
I
in Oregon. Shoot, that'd be great. I wouldn't hate BYU going to if you switch those around. What about Notre Dame going to Autzen and BYU going to Ole Miss?
You have BYU going down to Mormon.
Imagine you imagine BYU going to the Grove. What about contrasting styles there?
Holy crap! From Lavelle Edwards all the way down to Vaught Hemingway. And here's the thing, man. I'm not crapping on the G5 because I don't think that they don't belong in the college football playoff. They need their own playoff. Yeah. They need their own playoff. And it's not because of I hate the G5. It's because I'm begging you. I am begging the biggest of G5 defenders in college football. Answer me this question. I believe that a G5 team can run the table in their first game. We will eventually see a G5 team pull off an upset. Eventually, it will happen. Can they do it 3 more times?
No.
And then what's the point?
No, and everyone knows that, right? What's the best group of 5 team you've ever seen?
It's probably the best group of 5 team I've ever seen is probably one of the Boise State teams underneath Kellen Moore. That's probably the best one.
So I would say Oklahoma, right?
That's it. And even then, that was Jared Zabransky.
Yeah.
So we're going way back there. And Adrian Peterson still was on that Oklahoma team.
Yeah.
It was the one miracle. But if you said in the college football playoff, think about this for a second. Cincinnati, when they went to the college football playoff, dismantled by Alabama. And they had multiple future NFL talent on there. Wasn't even close.
That UCF team was good. They beat an Auburn team in a BCS bowl. So could UCF have won 3 more games that playoff?
That's the problem. Could they have done it 3 more times with McKenzie Milton?
No, not at all.
They would have done it once.
It's just not realistic.
How about this one? How about we talk about the team last year, the Boise State team?
They couldn't get out of the first round.
They got the first round bye, and then they
they couldn't get out of their first round.
They welcomed in Penn State, and it was close for what a quarter.
Yeah,
is that what we're saying? And they had a Heisman quarter caliber running back, and they nearly beat Oregon in the regular season. They nearly did, but they didn't. And you're telling me that team could win multiple times afterwards? Stop it.
Yeah.
I don't hate the G5 because I don't want them in. I do think that the G5 needs its own playoff because I want more of that. I want them to actually have an opportunity to win something. And I don't think that a team like Notre Dame that has been playing hot like hell belongs out of the playoff, while a team like JMU that struggled with Troy that needed a win over Southern Miss to guarantee their spot in the Sun Belt title game gets in. It just doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. It doesn't. And even looking at it from a clear standpoint of just simply game on game, Vanderbilt, Notre Dame, Texas have every right to be pissed off, and BYU has a right to be pissed off because of their out, and these 2 teams are in. And by the way, these 2 teams are getting new head coaches next year.